Tension is rising in Cameroon. 2 people are dead, dozens have been arrested, and parts of the country are on lockdown as the government moves to crush dissent ahead of the final announcement of this month's presidential election results. The unrest follows reports suggesting that 92-year-old President Paul Biya, the world's longest-serving head of state, is poised to secure yet another term in power. For many Cameroonians, this election feels less like a moment of democratic choice and more like the continuation of a decades-long political stalemate. But beneath the surface, the anger tells a deeper story of frustration, inequality, and a generation's growing disillusionment with a system that has barely changed in more than 40 years. The official results of Cameroon's presidential election are expected to be released on October 27th, according to Clement Atangana, head of the country's Constitutional Council. Yet few expect a surprise outcome. Local media outlets, citing preliminary figures from the National Electoral Commission (ELECOM), suggest that Biya's victory is almost certain. Biya, who has ruled since 1982, is not just the longest-serving leader in Africa, but the longest-ruling head of state anywhere in the world today. His party, the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement, or CPDM, dominates both parliament and local politics, making genuine opposition extremely difficult. However, this year's election has not gone without challenge. Opposition leader Issa Tchiroma Bakary, a former Biya ally who broke ranks years ago, has claimed victory himself. Tchiroma, who heads the Cameroon National Salvation Front, declared earlier this week that he had won 54.8% of the vote compared to Biya's 31.3%. In an emotional statement, he accused the ruling party and electoral authorities of manipulating results, saying, "The vast majority of the Cameroonian people will never accept that the council validates the historic scale of ballot stuffing and falsification." His words struck a chord with many in a country where distrust in government institutions runs deep. Cameroon's Constitutional Council has already dismissed 10 petitions alleging electoral malpractice, most of them submitted by opposition parties. Critics argue that this process has only deepened skepticism about the fairness of the vote. In response, Biya's ruling party labeled Tchiroma's claim of victory a grotesque hoax and an unacceptable fraud in a state of law. In an official statement, the CPDM said it was calmly awaiting the official results, projecting confidence that Biya's re-election is inevitable. But across Cameroon, that sense of calm is missing. From the bustling streets of Yaoundé to the dry, dusty towns of the far north region, protests have broken out, met with swift and often violent responses from security forces. The most serious unrest erupted on Wednesday in Garoua, Tchiroma's hometown in northern Cameroon. Clashes between demonstrators and police quickly escalated when security forces fired tear gas and live ammunition to disperse crowds. At least 2 people were killed, including a local teacher struck by stray bullets. In Yaoundé, the capital, smaller groups of protesters gathered near administrative buildings to denounce what they called stolen votes. Security forces quickly dispersed them, detaining several participants. Meanwhile, in Maroua, a key city in the far north and one of Tchiroma's strongholds, anger has taken a personal and emotional tone. A group of young residents left a handwritten letter outside the governor's office, expressing despair over poverty and exclusion. This message, referencing the nearby Boko Haram insurgency in Nigeria, highlights how desperation is driving some to the edge. For many, the letter is not a literal threat, but a symbol of how hopelessness and anger are feeding radicalization in Cameroon's marginalized regions. The Cameroonian government has reacted swiftly and harshly. In a televised statement, Paul Atangana, the Minister of Territorial Administration, announced that more than 20 protesters had been arrested and would face trial before a military tribunal. These individuals face serious charges, including incitement to rebellion and insurrection, G declared, warning that the government would not tolerate actions that threaten public order. At the same time, reports have surfaced internet restrictions in major cities, including Douala, the country's commercial hub. The digital rights group NetBlocks confirmed that internet access was being deliberately slowed or cut in several regions, a tactic Cameroon has used before during periods of political tension. The state-owned operator Camtel attributed the disruption to what it called a technical incident involving the WACS cable, claiming that service was being gradually restored in certain areas. However, many remain skeptical, suspecting the outages are part of an attempt to control the flow of information and prevent the organization of further protests online. Cameroon's crisis is not new. For years, the country has been struggling with political stagnation, corruption, and internal conflict, including a brutal separatist war in its English-speaking western regions. Yet Biya, despite his age and long rule, remains firmly in control, buoyed by loyalists in the military, the ruling party, and the state bureaucracy. His continued hold on power has made him a symbol of both stability and stagnation, a man who has overseen decades of growth and infrastructure development, but also presided over systemic inequality, repression, and limited democratic space. For opposition leader Issa Tchiroma Bakary and his supporters, this election represented a rare chance to challenge that system. But as the protests show, few believe they were ever given a fair shot. Amid the turmoil, some national institutions are calling for calm. The National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon, an influential Catholic body, issued an appeal to citizens to remain peaceful and patient as results are finalized. Archbishop Andrew Fuanya Nkea of Bamenda, who heads the NECC, urged restraint, saying, "It is our prayer that with the help of God and the commitment of all, our country will experience peace and stability in truth and will emerge stronger." Yet even as church leaders and international observers call for peace, few believe tensions will fade easily. The combination of political distrust, youth frustration, and economic hardship has created a combustible atmosphere. As Cameroon awaits the final announcement of results on October 27th, the stakes could not be higher. Paul Biya, who first came to power over 4 decades ago, may soon secure yet another term, extending one of the world's most enduring presidencies. But beneath that veneer of continuity lies a restless nation. From the northern towns to the urban centers, Cameroonians are questioning whether the country's political future will ever change, or whether the old guard will continue to write the same story for years to come.